Ooh, goodness. What a way to start a video. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to my little corner of the internet. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you are watching, it's kind of funny because when I started all of this, I very much was losing my mind. But I've swapped some components around and everything is working, but that is not to discount the steps that I took to get here. So if anybody's ever been a little interested in Linux as a whole, I know I put out kind of a teaser video. I didn't really go that far to explaining a whole lot, and that's because I've been trying to save the meat of what is essentially what I use it for anyways. Because it has 1,001 uses. It's about as general of a computing tool as anything else. Whether it's privy to yourself as an individual or not, you know, a lot of people might not incur it in their daily lives, but you probably touch it in some way or interact with it in some manner that you don't even realize. Like through your phone, a lot of people want to say, well, Android runs on Linux kernel on your phone, and that's true, but it's not indicative of a desktop computing experience. So it's not like because you know how to use your Android phone that you would be able to sit down in front of like an Ubuntu installation and be able to navigate. They're two completely different things. So anyways, I have since resolved my issue. A lot of my particular issue stemmed from one thing in particular, and I think maybe just putting in a board that had gigabit Ethernet seems to be what has cleared up most of the issue for me. So, one of the more pertinent use cases that I seem to come across, or that I typically enjoy more, if you watch a lot of tech, I'm not going to say tech in general, because like when you have tech YouTube, you have hardware and then you have software. So if you watch a lot of the software gurus around YouTube, guys like Network Chuck and those kind of guys, you always see that they're using some kind of Linux environment, usually in the cloud. And that's all fine and well, but that's always a cost. And if you're a guy, you don't even have to be like me. I was going to say a guy like me, but if you have a computer or sitting around that may be not new enough for you to like play any games on, but still is relatively okay when it comes to compute performance for things like document editing and things like that, it might be okay to run as a web server. And that's essentially what I've done here, and that's effectively what the wall mount PC is currently doing, even though it is equipped with a GPU right now. And that's so eventually maybe we can test out some of this Linux gaming stuff. Now it is only an RX 578 gig, which if you know your video cards, it's not the most powerful thing on the market, but when it comes to Linux compatibility, especially with this being I believe a 4th gen Intel platform, we should have relatively decent compatibility with some older games, some new-ish if they're not super demanding on resources. But there's a few things I've been wanting to check out in the Linux world, so maybe we'll be able to get an updated motherboard and GPU for the wall mount PC at some point, because that would be super awesome to be able to test out. There's an open source build of the SteamOS operating system that I'm super interested in checking out. I would really like to test it on a handheld, but man, those things are expensive. I like the Steam Deck and I think it's really cool, but for the price that it costs for the hardware that's in it, you could just get one of those Beelink mini PCs. The new ones have the 7th gen Ryzen in them. So you get the 7th gen Ryzen and the even newer ones, which if you saw the Linus Tech Tips video that was released like yesterday on the new Asus handheld PC or whatever they're calling that, the SoC in that also has new Zen 4 core with RDNA 3 graphics, which I think is really, really neat. But we're going to start seeing those in these mini PCs, and I'm going to say there's going to be somebody that has probably thought about that. You could probably get one of these mini PCs or even a laptop and hack the board, and almost, I feel like. But you could definitely get the same experience. I'm thinking of like building a handheld. I would never have the time to do that, but I could see somebody kind of doing that. And I have thought about that when it comes to doing the Suitcase arcade machine, because as powerful as these APU graphics are getting, you know, we have an RX 580 for the Suitcase arcade machine right now. I would like it to be a better graphics card so we could cover more ground when it comes to emulation, but we are also on a 7th gen Intel i7 7700K, so we might be able to get away with something like an RTX 3060 Ti. That's maybe still even too fast of a card for that platform, but it should be pretty even, you know what I mean? Like, I want to try to do the platform itself justice, but I don't want to be leaving any performance untapped either. So I want to really figure out which card is the best pairing there, because it might just be the RX 580 that's already paired with it down here. The Suitcase arcade machine idea is still kind of far off for the channel at this point in time, because we need things like arcade buttons. The monitor and everything is in there, but I need another PCIe riser. Just very odds and ends things. But anyways, that's kind of the updates on all that stuff. Let's get on to the Linux bit for anybody that may be watching. So, if you have an old computer lying around, could even be a laptop, could be an old Dell, an old HP, any of those sorts of things, you can definitely do what I have done here. So if you visit my website at www, and that's important if you're going to run a website out of your house. There's like subtle caveats unless you want to pay out the WASI for a static IP address. That's like the one stipulation. You can point it to your IP address that you have through your ISP, and you can do these various functions, but you won't be able to do it without attaching it to like www or, you know, store.whatever.com. You have to put, it has to have that first 3 letters. So usually on the internet, you just put in techyeah.net and it takes you there, and it would if I was hosting a DNS server and those sorts of things from my house. But since I'm just hosting the web server, it's very, very important that you put the www if you're going to visit my website. At least the first time you go there. Your browser should remember it from that point on, and then you could just type in techyeah.net. One of the reasons that's important is because the way we have it set up to avoid having to pay any hosting fees or anything of that nature, that's just one of the stipulations. So we're running a dynamic DNS through noip.com. If you want to check any of this stuff out, I suggest that you go there first and set that up, because that is actually going to be kind of the back end, the fallback, in case your IP address changes and it doesn't necessarily update to no IP all the way, or just to make sure you're covering all your ground so you can have an A name record that points to your IPv4 address at your house, and then you can also have your dynamic host name, which mine is techyeah.ddns.net. Doesn't really bother me if anybody knows the backend address. And if you go there, that's also my website, but you should see it will change in your browser. If you type that in, it should change it to say techyeah.net at the top. If everything works correctly. Now, it's not always 100%, but you run into these sorts of things when you want to operate on a lower budget. So, and then the other use that you get out of doing this is, instead of having to rent a Linux desktop from somewhere like Linode or AWS or even Azure, all these things are great, and even doing like the subsystem for Windows is cool, but nothing really comes close to bare metal in my opinion. And if you look at some of these companies, they're even kind of falling back to the old style monolithic design of things, and that's because running a gazillion virtual machines has just not gotten practical when you can have one machine doing a lot of these different things as good as CPUs has gotten. So like that way you can kind of consolidate. You still run virtual machines, but each virtual machine is doing more tasks, and that's actually a good thing. So if anybody's still there with me, so if you run, there's a tool called XRDP. It's basically one command unless you're running Debian, which I am. There's a couple other things that you have to do, because when you try to log in remotely, it will basically say, oh no, something went wrong, and it'll give you a little frowny face, almost like the Mac frowny icon. But when done correctly, what's really neat about all this is you can actually add as many users as the platform can handle. So I'm not really sure, because I haven't really tried to see. I know there's a guy on YouTube, I can't really remember his name, but he already did. He was trying to show people that you could basically run like one box as a server, and then you could get a bunch of low cost, like the Mini S that I featured on my channel. It's like $150 little computer, or 120 bucks. Like little cheap machine, still quad core. It has about as much power as a i5 6500, which that's not really that bad if you think about it for web browsing and stuff. But anyways, you could get a bunch of those and put them around your house, and then if you could connect them all to a remote desktop on your Linux machine. And I will actually demo that here in just a moment, because that is actually one of the features that I use the most. Because if I'm doing anything on Windows, but I want to log in, especially when I'm writing anything from code on my server or website, if I'm not doing it directly through Joomla, which is what I aim to change today, which is what sparked all of this. So I don't know how long the stream is going to run for, but I currently run Apache 2 and MariaDB. So MariaDB is basically your MySQL server. For anybody unfamiliar with that, basically when you run a lot of modern applications, web applications especially, they have a data store that they pull from, and typically that's a database of some sort. And a lot of websites use either Postgres or MySQL. There's also Google Firebase. There's all kinds of different databases out there. I can't really speak to how many, but typically, like even if it's local, you have SQLite. So there's a plethora of databasing applications out there, but the most common for WordPress and a lot of other web pages is MariaDB. It's open source. That's not to say that there aren't other websites out there, like ones that run on Windows servers or Windows IIS or whatever they call it. I haven't really interacted with a lot of Windows Server stuff. I'm more familiar with Apache 2. I've been trying to get more into running Nginx, just because it's a lot more involved. It's more difficult to set up, but a lot of companies use it as a load balancer, and that's actually a project I'm working on for work. But anyhow, so doing this in your house, you have a lot of options, especially if you want to get into the software side of doing stuff on the computer. So if you're interested in being a database admin, which it is a thing, you know what I mean? Like my boss, Nick, in particular, that's not his job title, but he's so good at interacting with these databases because he's been doing it for so long that he can do a lot of the manipulation through text commands. And some of these will be ridiculously long, but he's been doing it for so long. But that's essentially what a database administrator would be doing, because you will know the ins and outs of what's going on in the database. A lot more than just, say, even me, if I'm programming and set it up. I'm basically building a construct like, this is my table of users. For users, I want to save username, password, maybe email address. If you're selling things, possibly address, and stuff like that. That's what you'll be doing there. And then the other side of things is the actual web server, which is basically, instead of just serving you a directory listing when you visit a website, that is actually rendering the HTML out to serving it to the web browser anyways, in a manner in which the web browser can interpret it and then feed it back to you as a web page. Everybody with me so far? I don't have any chats yet, so I know it's in the middle of a Saturday. Everybody's probably got a gazillion better things to do than sit here and watch me, but this is what I consider to be kind of a good time. So without further ado, I want to go ahead and switch over to the Linux desktop here, because I want to show you before I get into, because we're going to wipe this out. We're going to wipe it out, reinstall Debian, and then I'll show you exactly what to do from scratch for anybody that might be interested, just because I even have, it's just a regular rich text file that I had written out at some point. I will find, and I will add that as a how-to once all of this is finished, of course. And one of the reasons being, now techyeah.net won't be live during this either, so don't think that that you're gonna log on and like mess with my page while we do this. But it will, when it is back up, it will be what you guys see here. And we're gonna be running WordPress. Now, one of the main reasons for that, I switched over to Joomla, 5 or 6 months ago. Around the beginning of the year, and that's just because I wanted to try it out. It's an alternative content manager. It is similar to WordPress, but it is very different. And I guess if you're doing like one thing and one thing only, which is just blogging or what have you, even like a forum, that sort of thing would be probably really served really well on Joomla. But I've seen those things done on WordPress to great effect as well. And the great thing I think about WordPress is 70% of the internet's websites-ish are ran on it. A lot of, you have to kind of separate the internet nowadays. You have what are websites, and then you have what are web apps. Like Facebook, web app, but Google.com, web app still. I mean, like the search is more, it's a web app. So, but like if you go to like my web page or even the site of a local business is yours, that's a website because it is strictly informational. Some of them might have app functionality built in, like if you're going to order something online. But essentially, they just connect you with information. You might have contact forms and things like that. But that's basically the differentiator. You know, a web page is more of like a listing of things and information that you might want to know about said topic or item, where a web app is actually going to be an application that does actual work or does something or manipulates something somewhere. Cool. Anyhow, let's go ahead and switch over here real quick. I don't have my pad set up here, so we're going to switch this over to PC Cap here. All right. Now, I don't have the music on in this one. If you guys want the background music back, you'll have to send a chat in and let me know. But until then, I'm kind of sorry for the over-the-shoulder perspective I have here. I'm going to try to improve this at some point in the future. But for right now, this lets me see if any of you guys chat. and it also lets me interact with the screen here that you guys are looking at. So when I had the first gen i7 over here, what was kind of caught me off guard was the onboard Ethernet port built into the board was actually a 10100 fast Ethernet, which moreover I think was causing my issue, because it was still serving my website and all of that stuff was working just fine. Which, if we bring that up here, oh, there we go. All right, we gotta. See, I forgot the www. And see, and then it even changed it. It got rid of the www, but we had to put it there the first time. All right, but if you come here, sorry, you guys are all looking at my back. So all of this was working just fine. But the problem was, and I will show you guys here, was when I was on Windows, because like this is all fine and good if I'm out in the workshop, but if I'm sitting up in my office and I'm like, hey, I need to do some stuff on Linux, I have to walk all the way out here physically, and that's not the ideal solution, right? So what we do is we install XRDP and we configure it in such a way where we can go ahead and just pull up bog standard Windows Remote Desktop. And if you are familiar with port forwarding, you can even do this and access your computer wherever you are, as long as you have an internet connection. So let me go ahead and switch over to the Windows desktop here to show you. Okay, so let's minimize this here. All right, we're going to go ahead and just pull up our remote desktop connection here. I'm going to put in the IP address of this machine here that we had pulled up on the desktop here. We'll connect. We'll tell yes, we want to trust it. And we'll put in all this stuff here. It's telling me to activate Windows. I just configured this machine, so I really haven't had the chance yet to take care of all that, but I will, trust me. I have a key, I just have not put it in yet because I am bombarded with 100 million things and I only have 2 days to be able to do any of this stuff, and we still got to do tech news for tech dudes. I'm not sure if we're going to do that this Sunday or try to do it every other Sunday, but it is something I would like to keep intact and keep moving forward. But anyhow, so this is what was not working for me. I went back to saying, oh snap, you can't do this, and I'm like, man, I'm gonna have to reinstall all this stuff, and which isn't bad. It's just you gotta go back through putting in all the text commands and remembering your configurations for everything, but not really. You can save a lot of it. See, with Linux, it's kind of a half and half kind of thing. Like there's a bunch of configurations and stuff you can save, but then there's stuff that you still have to reinstall, and it can be involved. So we'll get into that here in a minute, because we definitely have to back up a bunch of stuff. Mainly stuff that's in the media folder that I've uploaded, because one great thing about doing this is not only can you run an FTP server from your Linux machine, and you can access that from outside your house, so you can send files to your home server, big files even. You can, I have a gigabit fiber connection here, and I've sent 50 gigabyte files to my house. this eliminates a lot of bull crap when it comes to paying for cloud storage, paying for access to said storage. Literally get you, a couple of 2 terabyte SSDs, even the SATA ones, and put them in an old box like this. Even a Dell machine will have like 4 to 6 SATA connections on the inside. So get you some SATA cables, get some SATA SSDs, put 4 of them in there. You can even enable something, like even if you wanted to use Windows, you could put them in Windows storage spaces, and you could still install FileZilla server and serve that out to the internet and connect to it in such a way where you can send yourself files. But there's also other ways of doing it. Anyways, gotta stay on task here. I will talk way too much if you let me. Anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and close this out here so I can remember where we are. Go ahead and go here. We're just gonna go to log out. Here we are. Bring back up OBS here. Oop. Did that really go? Oh man. You guys didn't see any of that, did you? What was that even? OBS, I am so lost right now. I could have sworn I hit PC cap and then hit this. Oh. I have those hotkeys mapped to my... Welcome to my live stream, everybody. I really could benefit from having an operator here on the weekends. I really, really could. It would be worth... It'd be worth a few bucks. Because this gets aggravating sometimes. So when I went to type in my password, when I went to remotely log in, you guys, we had an issue where it switched back over to the main screen there. That is a problem. So, backtracking a little bit, you saw me get to the point where I could at least log in. It's the same screen that we were looking at here just a minute ago. Sorry for all the warpage there on the OBS screen, you guys. So, rid of this here, but this is essentially the same thing that you guys just saw. My issue has resolved itself basically. So what I really want to do is get WordPress installed. So you have a number of benefits from running WordPress from your house. One, you don't have to pay for web hosting. You do have to still pay for your internet connection. That's like a given, right? But a lot of people have access to fiber now. And so the amount of traffic even, of course, if you start getting popular and getting a lot of traffic, you might want to look into hosting at that point. But especially even a small business on a gigabit fiber connection, you could have, quite a few visitors, monthly, daily, weekly, what have you, and you're going to be completely fine. So a lot of small businesses especially should probably look into that maybe if you want to run a website, because there's so many plugins for WordPress. There's a lot of them you have to pay them, but a lot of them have, you pay them once or you pay them annually, and they're not that expensive. Like from a business owner's perspective, the amount of money you stand to make from implementing some of these things, like WordPress has a really good plugin for doing live ordering. So if you want to provide people with the ability to put in an order and then come pick it up without having to pay the overhead to a company like DoorDash, you pay, for the plugin once, and then you just have access to it. You implement it, you put your menu in there, then you have all these potential sales, right? Because now it's really easy for people. And WordPress also has another ability of being able to turn your WordPress site into a PWA or a progressive web app, which is basically an app, and you can install it on iPhone, Android, Windows. It's cross-platform, and that's essentially what the Twitter app is a progressive web app. So you can, those are all possibilities if you work with the right person that knows the right stuff, and WordPress could be the start of that, because like I said, you can always move it off onto an actual host, and you're not going to lose any of that stuff because you still have your plugins. So for somebody that doesn't really want to focus specifically on web development, you know what I mean? If you want to just implement things that you already know to exist, it's really, really a great tool. There's ways even to implement ChatGPT into your website to be able to chat with visitors. There's just a plethora of things that you can do with it. So I think WordPress is still very useful, and I want to switch back over to it because Joomla is definitely not as expansive. I did manage to install a plugin on it called Community Builder, and that's been really great, but it's actually like 50 plugins, and it's very spread out, and there's a cost for everything beyond just the basic plugin. Like I said, I'm okay with paying for a plugin, but I feel like I should pay for a plugin and not a gazillion different plugins called the same thing that do different things. You know, they're all called Community Builder, but they're some another aspect of it, and I really, that's great that they're good at doing that, but they basically have a lock on Joomla. Anything useful, you're going to be using Community Builder, and like I said, if you're a one-off trying to do one thing, it may even work for us, but I want to implement store and other things in there, and those things are just so much easier to do on WordPress. So I've debated on whether we just basically strip out Joomla, delete the databases, and start on this install, or since this installation of Linux in particular has been through 3 different machines, that we just start from the beginning and reinstall Linux and do it that way. I'm kind of leaning towards the latter, but I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to put that all on stream or not, because it is a Saturday. It's already 4:11. I've already been yapping at you guys for 38 minutes and have not accomplished a whole lot. But anyways, so let's go ahead and get into it here, man. Like I just said. So let me go around here and grab, I have my flash drives over here I need to get real quick. I've got these ones here too. But I know my Debian ISO is on one of them. Okay. Ugh. So this one I think is the right one. Although, I think the last time I had checked, so I know Debian had their newest version 6, I believe, was in beta still. Not really looked into that. I've been using Debian 5.4 or whatever. Can't even remember. See, that's the thing. I'm on the road so much in the mapping car now. You know, even just a couple months go by, and my train of thought is completely shifted between, you know, the software to the hardware, because we've been, you know, I've been running the LiDAR arrays and the camera, and my head's been so focused on those settings and being on the road and everything, I kind of forgotten exactly all this stuff. So it does say Debian on it, so that's a good thing. So we do have our Debian install. I have like a Ventrue USB stick somewhere, but it was not over there in my bag, so this should suffice. This is exactly what is already on here, but this should allow us to start from scratch. There's a few things that we're going to have to contend with this particular machine, and there's a lot of things that kind of get glossed over a little bit when you watch some of the build guides on the internet. So this build has a GPU, as I mentioned earlier. Not really that much of an issue until you want things like your sound to work over HDMI, little things like that. You want your video rendering, especially this is only going to be 1080p or 1440 by 900 for this monitor, so it's not having to push out anything relevant. But if you want to actually get hardware acceleration, installing the drivers is kind of a must. And then especially for me in my particular situation where I want to run XRDP, having the appropriate video driver installed is kind of important, even for being able to render your desktop remotely. So, word to the wise. And there is a way to get your audio to work over XRDP as well, which is something that actually took me a little while to figure out, but luckily Googling a few of these simple questions usually lands you on the correct answer. It's just knowing how to move throughout Linux and putting the right commands in the right places to get the right output. That is the more difficult thing when it comes to running Linux, and the thing that most people, even myself, stumble on from time to time because it does become difficult at a certain point, especially when you're jumping back and forth. You see some of these guys that are running a bunch of different distros and checking them all out, and that it's neat from this perspective of checking them out. But when I need something to do actual work, I usually turn to Debian because it's real solid and stable, or sometimes Ubuntu Server, just because there's certain software that prefers it, like GeoServer, and especially if you're a super nerd and knows what GeoServer is, it is like a requirement. It wants to run on only Ubuntu Server. It's not like you couldn't run it on something else, but like if you don't want to have to check the box and fiddle with it a whole bunch, then it's best to just run on it, what it recommends when you download it. So anyways, you start getting into here and backing up everything. I'm trying to think of the best method. So when you have a Linux installation, if you're going to use Apache 2 for your web server like I am, all of your data is going to be located in one spot. You can change this, of course, which is the beauty of Linux. And Linux was originally made to be an operating system that could run Nix or Unix software or Minix or any Nix. That's it, like Nix-like. That's like anything you hear Unix with the Nix in there. That's essentially what the original goal was to run the stuff that Unix was running, but on the x86 platform. So, my mouth is super dry. No wonder. I'm gonna have to get a bottle of water, you guys. Hold on a second. I'm like, no wonder these guys always have a bottle of water on their set. I am starting to understand why. I have a bottle of water over here, ladies and gentlemen. I apologize for the short delay here. Oh, that was really good. Okay. All right. Okay. Now, your Etsy. This is where your Apache configuration files are always going to be. They're going to be in Etsy, Apache 2. Now, this is where we will come back to quite frequently, especially when we want to. This is where we have our. If you see, we're right there where it says techyeah.net, lessl.conf. That's where we have it running on our Let's Encrypt certificate. So we do have full HTTPS. So sometimes browsers will give you the warning when you're visiting my website that it couldn't be verified, or usually that doesn't happen with Let's Encrypt anymore, but sometimes. It's just one of those things where the internet wants you to pay for something else. The encryption is important. So having a good certificate and having SSL enabled for your website is never a bad idea. But sometimes it just does feel like another thing that you need to shell some money out for to appease the internet overlords in some way. Like I said, I get encryption has its values, it has its place, but sometimes I'm just lost by all this silly stuff. So thanks goodness for things like Let's Encrypt that allows you to get a certificate that you can install on your web server at home and get it secure. And then, of course, there are still paid options out there for you if you choose to continue to go down this rabbit hole. Because, like I said, you can also run DNS at your house and fix some of these issues that I have, like with having to append www on the end of my website. I could pay for better options for my DNS, and I could, you know what I mean? There's always more that you can do because this stuff has been around for so long. And of course, if you wanted to forgo all of this, you could always just start a Squarespace. But generally, if you're wanting to have that full control over your website, doing this might be a good option for you. And you can't necessarily run your own Squarespace like that at your house. You can run your own Squarespace all day for $4.99 a month or whatever it is. I'm sure it's more than that now, but this you can do without that stipulation, and you can do just about all the same stuff, and it's really just about as easy. A lot of these web hosting companies, Shopify is really no different, but especially Squarespace and Wix, they advertise, that web pages are easy to build. Well, WordPress has actually gotten really insanely easy over the last 5 years or so. It's super easy to add stuff, super easy to build your own website. A lot of it's drag and drop anymore. So, anyways, if we go here, we go down here, we have a var, and then we'll have www. In here is where all of the files for your website are going to be contained. Your HTML folder here. We see this is literally, I'm not going to open any of this stuff because it's very important that you don't do that on a stream. We don't want to open any of these files because they all contain important information related to your website, such as usernames and passwords for your databases and all that sort of thing. Like I said, some of this I'm not going to be able to get on camera, but I do plan on doing like a full how-to. This is kind of a crash course per se to show you exactly what it is that I want to cover. I really would like to do it live, but this is going to take me some time and going back and forth between Google search and remembering, just remembering everything, and that's a process. We would be here for several hours. Yes?
Your car crashed. Mom said come out here immediately.
Who crashed? Okay, well, apparently, okay. There's a car crash out in front of my house, ladies and gentlemen. I'm gonna have to cut the stream short, I suppose. I really don't have a break screen at the moment. Yeah, there's really not much I can. I'm gonna have to really cut this short. I will try to be back on here in a little while, hopefully, and maybe I can do some of this on the stream. This is kind of more over the issue, just I don't have any time. Let me go out here and make sure everybody is okay, and I will catch everybody later. Look forward to the video for setting up a web server. I was hoping to get at least some of the start footage now, but anyways, this could be important. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will catch you in the next one.